We talked about you have to have quote and bind online. That's obvious, right?
Yep.
Then you're going to have this data start augmenting the process. So if you think about it as pipes, the pipes are fixed for small business insurance. Then we're going to start figuring out what's in these pipes and how can we make it better. Then the third part is people are going to get really, really smart about small business insurance and almost like optimizing what customers are going after. What business do we know how to help in ridiculous ways? Like maybe it's like anybody who sells aquatic diving equipment, we can tell them every single risk that they're going to have, and then we'll help them and keep them as a customer for the next 10 years. Like that kind of optimization is coming, and I think it's going to be really, really interesting and really helpful, frankly, for businesses.
I'm Chris Cheatham, and this is the future of insurance.
This episode is brought to you by Medallia, the market leader in customer and employee experience. Their award-winning SaaS platform, Medallia Experience Cloud, makes all your other applications customer and employee aware. Medallia uses proprietary AI and machine learning to reveal predictive insights that drive powerful business actions and outcomes. Leading insurers like Prudential and Zurich use Medallia to reduce churn, turn detractors into promoters, create in-the-moment cross-sell and upsell opportunities, and drive revenue-impacting business decisions. Learn more at medallia.com. And the Future of Insurance book series, available exclusively from Amazon or at future-of-insurance.com.
Chris Cheatham, thanks for joining me today.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for having me.
I'm really curious to get into your story because you were on this path of defining a new way of looking at certain things in the industry and analyzing policies and coverage and helping to bring things to the surface, and then acquisition by Bold Penguin, and then not so long after, Bold Penguin's acquired by AmFam.
Yep.
So you've had quite a ride, and I'm just like as a watcher of the whole thing, I'm super curious just to hear about some of that journey. But I do want to get into kind of the idea behind RiskGenius and what you were trying to accomplish and what you're working on in that vision today.
Cool. Yeah, so I always like to start with the origin story. Let's see. So I used to be a lawyer, or my kids actually were doing one of those fortune cookie things this morning, the fortune thing where you pull it out.
Yeah.
And it came up as lawyer. And I was like, oh, that's not exciting. I used to be a lawyer. So yeah, I used to be a lawyer, read a lot of I was doing insurance claims, particularly like construction claims.
Okay.
And so saw lots of insurance policies, lots of documents related to that. I grew a kind of a general dislike for reviewing documents because I spent like 3 years reviewing one case's files, which ended up being the same document 8 times each. I figured this out at the end because they didn't know how to deduplicate the documents with like technology.
Yeah.
So I really started paying a lot of attention to just general document technology, like how do you sort through documents? And that leads to machine learning. At the time, kind of in the legal space, there was this thing called technology assisted review, which is basically using computers, like machine learning, to sort through documents and find the ones that are most relevant before a human reviews those.
When is all this? Like, what's the time?
This was like 2006 to 2010.
Okay.
That time period.
So still, when you say machine learning, that's why I'm asking. It's like, that's still really early.
I mean, it still is really early, to be totally frank, right? Like, I don't think we've done a whole lot with it yet. But that was pretty early. I mean, it's, it started in the 70s or the 80s with some government funded project. But so, yeah, I kind of started paying attention though, because number one, it was like, all right, my job could go away involving reviewing documents. But number two, like, how could I harness the power of this technology? And so it got burned out on the practice of law. I'd moved into a big firm in Washington, D.C., and it was it was a mess. It was not a fit for me. And so went out on my own, tried practicing law on my own, really didn't enjoy that either because I realized you have this thing called clients, and construction clients on little tiny residential cases are intense, to say the least. So from there, I called a friend of mine who worked at an insurance company, and I was like, hey, I really just liked writing your claims, right? Writing up your claims. Could I do that for you? And she's like, well, I don't really need claims. What I need is like a Dropbox claim document, kind of like Facebook and the cloud solution. Like she emailed that to me, and I was like, oh my gosh, that's a lot.
Yeah.
So, I started poking around and realized like just the management of claim documents was really messy, which I knew,
Yeah.
but like I never thought about trying to solve it with
Yeah.
technology really. And so went down that path. We were doing claim document management, and then that insurance company we were working for, one of the underwriters had accessed a file in our software, and she really liked the design, which is funny because like I really had focused on the design more so than anything else,
Yeah.
because I just happened to read like the Steve Jobs bio around that time. And so the design was beautiful. I argued maybe the tech wasn't as awesome as it needed to be to manage, all these claim files. But the underwriter calls me and she said, I really like this. Could we use your software to review insurance policies?
Hmm.
And I was like, huh, that's interesting. And I was like, tell me about the problem. And I'll never forget this moment because I was getting ready to go pitch some venture capitals or angel investors actually that became investors in our company. And so I'm waiting in like a kind of a holding room, and she starts telling me about the problem, and I start whiteboarding,
Hmm.
what she's telling me about. And like the first three things I listed on the board ended up becoming like our first three features in what became RiskGenius.
Wow.
So, but we didn't like immediately start building that thing. I called around to people in the industry. I have a friend, who she works at a big broker here in Kansas City. And I was like, tell me, what's going on with reviewing insurance policies? And she's like, oh my gosh. And,
Yeah.
gave me an earful about, she spent the previous weekend reading a document out loud to another person, like reading an insurance policy out loud to another person who sits there and red lines another version of it. That was crazy. Like that's
Yeah.
crazy talk, right?
Yeah.
Or there's
And
another.
super common.
Yeah, super
Yeah.
common. There's another woman who that I spoke with. She was a broker. She actually works at a big insurtech. She was like but this was before she went to that insurtech. And so I was like, tell me about how you review insurance policies. And she's like, the best solution I've found is you print them out, pull out an X-Acto knife and cut them up into clauses. And then you move the clauses around on your desk next to the other policies clauses.
Wow.
And so I like would use that anecdote when I would go talk to people at conferences and stuff. I'd be like, how many of you pull out an X-Acto knife, and people would raise their hands. And I was like,
That's
oh my
nuts.
Lord, this is
That's
crazy.
nuts.
So yeah, it's a big problem. It's still a big problem reviewing insurance policy language and understanding it in the commercial insurance space.
So when you were starting to form the vision, you probably weren't thinking like Staples, the office supply store, is our biggest competitor, like selling X-Acto
Oh
knives and
yeah,
paper
that's a
and
really
whatnot.
good
Yeah.
point. I was like, where are you going with this? Like Staples.
I wasn't sure it was too much of a stretch, but I was like, no,
Yeah.
I mean that's like an art project.
Well, it is. And
Yeah.
like, I actually will always, when people ask me, what's your competition? I would always say whatever the most common lowest denominator was. So most people didn't actually cut the clauses up, but what they would
Yeah.
do is they would copy a clause and paste it into an Excel spreadsheet. So I always said, our biggest competitor is PDF and Excel,
Mm-hmm.
because that's how people do this right now. It's not the whiz bang startup down the street that's trying to do the same thing. It's not, Google or Amazon, because this
Yeah.
is too small of a problem for them to even care about.
Yeah.
It is what people are doing right now. That's the competition.
I think there's so many pockets of this industry where it's easy to focus on some other player, but actually the main competition is not doing anything, not buying something.
Yeah.
And like
100%.
huge greenfield spaces where we're focusing on the wrong side of it. Like it's not about this
Yeah.
teeny player over here. It's
I
about
mean,
the 90% who do nothing.
yeah, that's kind of where my brain's at right now with small business insurance. And that's a whole nother thing. We can go down that road, but
Yeah.
like, I think it is greenfields. Like I've been doing a ton of analysis on like trying to, whenever I get into a company or a product, I try to understand like the ROI and the dollars behind it.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, number one, what the heck were people doing? Like, I think one of the strangest parts of commercial insurance is cold leads. Like I've run the numbers on it. I'm testing it in the marketplace, but like cold leads where you're buying like a lead for $10
Yeah.
and then calling them, and you have like I don't know, maybe a 10% chance, 20% chance they even pick up the phone.
Yeah.
Is a horrible ROI. And like, that's why I guess people hate small business insurance a lot of times, is like, there was not a great model. And so that's something I think that's shifting right now, like completely shifting. There is a model starting to emerge where this can work. So it's kind of fun.
Yeah. Oh, that's really cool. So So you have this whiteboard moment while waiting to go and pitch some investors,
Yep.
and the product is born in a sense, whether you realize it or not at the time. How do you
Yep.
get from there to the Bold Penguin acquisition?
Let's see. So that
It's
would have been
quite a
like,
bit of time, right?
yeah. So that would have been the whiteboard moment was probably sometime 2013, 2014. And then, the Bold Penguin moment was 2020. So in between there was, from that first, we raised $13 million. So that's one component of it. The other component of it was building a great team, 30 plus people, all focused on, how do we understand insurance coverage language with computers so that we can help people. So building out that team here in Kansas City, and then talking to customers ridiculous amounts of time, like to the point where they got really annoyed with us because they're like, we've told you this before, but you just have to go back and keep getting
Yeah.
feedback to understand, like, what's the problem you're trying to solve. Because like where we really settled on was like kind of policy checking for brokers and coverage analysis for carriers, which are two different problems.
Mm-hmm.
And I think in hindsight, looking back, I wish I'd picked a smaller segment of each of those problems, right? So like on the policy checking side, maybe pick a couple carriers and a couple products and go solve policy checking there,
Mm.
and then build up from there. Instead of trying to, there's an old saying, like, how do you eat an elephant? One bite at a time, right? And I think in some ways we tried to eat the whole elephant in one bite, instead of starting at the tail or starting at the foot or whatever. And this has gotten very morbid, so I'm gonna move on from this analogy.
Well, let me press you on something, because I was gonna say, when you said talking to all these customers and going back to them and to the point that they were getting annoyed, like that's in my startup experience, that's one of the things I think a lot of them struggle with is the adage that you need to talk to 100 customers to understand the market. And a lot of
Yep.
them are like, "Oh yeah, we've talked to customers," and you find out it's like three or four, maybe five.
Yep.
So you're doing that right, but the flip side of that, or the dark side of it, is you hear everything under the sun. Yes, some ideas coalesce, but it can
Yep.
lead to elephant eating, right? Because you're hearing about a much bigger problem and more nuances to it.
Yep.
So what was it? Was that what led you down that path of kind of biting off more than you could chew, or is there a way to kind of let the two things live together, like hearing everything but
Yeah.
figuring out a subset?
Yeah. I mean, I think that that's not something I'm particularly good at, is putting on blinders to solve one particular problem when you're hearing about other problems.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm better at it now than I was because I took my first cycle through it with RiskGenius and learned kind of my weaknesses there. So I think that's, one of the big things: put on blinders and go, and ignore all the other problems that you can solve. Um, I think number two is I wasn't necessarily smart enough about insurance to know that I was looking at multiple different problems, or to understand that, okay, trying to do 1,000 carriers or 100 carriers is going to be really difficult if you do it, especially across product lines. So focus on one product. I mean, just to give you an idea, like when we first started that kind of Risk Genius beta project, just to test it and figure this out, like a carrier gave me a lot of data,
Yeah.
right? Lots of clauses that they had actually put into Excel spreadsheets. And so we use that to kind of test our machine learning tool, like set. And then we tried it on some new documents. They uploaded a document, and I remember looking at the document and just being like, what is this? And it turned out like there was more than just commercial general liability policies in the world. There
Yeah.
was a property policy that had, perils excluded and perils included, which are words I'd literally never seen together. And so realizing that what I did for GL wasn't going to work for everything else was kind of an eye opener at that time. And that was back in 2013. So imagine that, like, that, like any insurance person knows that, but like I was pretty naive about all of that and like
Yeah.
the differences in these policy structures and wordings. So
Well,
I don't know. I think a lot of times you just have to figure it out. It also, though, we picked a very, very nasty, tedious, difficult problem to solve. So for us in particular, being very, very narrow focused probably was important.
yeah. So where did you start to get traction, or where did something start to come out as like this is a product, this is something we can push on.
Yeah.
People respond to it.
Yeah, the first one was a big pilot we did. Not a big pilot. First one was a pilot we did with I don't know, AIG, right? Where they had they did these awesome innovation challenges back in the day. I don't know if they still do these, where they would have little pockets of people that form teams, and then they would find a problem they want to solve internally at their company, and then they would go find a solution. And so there's this awesome woman named Peggy who she was working on her team, and they decided they wanted to look at like, how can we check policies and understand coverages, and so she found us, brought us in, and we learned so much from them. And then they had that classic, all the executives at the very top level that had given us our budget went away, and a new set came in, and budgets were froze for a year, which might as well mean all the budget's gone, because as a startup, you can't wait a year. And so we had to very quickly find something else to do. And I'll always remember like that project was going away, and I was like, oh my gosh, what do I do? Like, that was going to be our big carrier for the year to get this thing off the ground. And then we got an email from like Deloitte, and they were running an innovation pitch thing for QBE. QBE had just announced their $50 million fund. And so ended up out in California pitching them. Usually I hated pitch competitions because that's not my style, but like we got selected out of that as the first investment from the QBE fund. And one of the keys was they found a very, very big use case, which was, and I didn't even understand the use case at the time. I think it's evolved a lot, but they basically had QBE was like 12 different companies essentially coalesced in North America. So they had 12 different companies' forms, and they needed to rationalize and understand all those forms. And it was kind of, their current solution wasn't really working. And so we became their forms library. That was a big deal.
And that's actually a pretty common problem. Like, it might be bigger for QBE because of how they form in the US, but M&A is happening all the time between carriers, and different paper is used and switched. And I mean, it's almost the same problem the brokers have with lots of different policies, but the carriers need it for themselves.
Yeah, it's exactly right. Yeah, we're talking, I call those like book rolls, right? A lot of times. And so, yeah, it's a big one.
So that's like the mid-teens now?
Yeah, when was that? No, when was it? Yeah, I'm losing track of my years. That would be like 2016 or 17, sometime around then. 2016 and 17. There's a guy named Ted Stuckey who we kind of got in the trenches and figured everything out along the way, and like there's really hilarious, if you go back in time, there's really hilarious contract addendums that we negotiated that if we had actually had a lawyer review them, the lawyer would have been like, what are you numbskulls doing? Like, this does not make any sense. Like, our verbiage made no sense in the contract addendums. And he's not there anymore, so I can talk about this now. But yeah, he was a good guy, helped us get it over the finish line. And they just actually completed a big review of their property policies and put out one of those press releases kind of touting our technology. So that was like a big moment. Press releases are a big moment. It's really funny for the life of a startup when you can get a company to talk about your product. So
QB has actually been aggressive is probably the wrong word, but like they've been very willing to try things and experiment and then be open about it. I know quite a few insurtechs who've had good success with starting, early on with QBE, whether it's in the US or elsewhere.
Yeah, they have a really cool lab up in Wisconsin that I got to visit. And then I got to visit Australia and go down there and do kind of explain our technology with some of the others they had invested in. That was so much fun. Like, man, what I would pay to go to Australia right now, right? I haven't done a trip for a year, and it would just be so much fun to go to Australia, for example. But yeah,
hopefully soon. When you looked at like the original ideas that were floating around in that whiteboarding moment and what you started to work on, how did that play out? Like, was it the things that you saw initially that ended up being your core products or what seemed to be resonating more? Or was it a shift that came up or something opportunistic that redefined and actually became the lead for you?
Yeah. Just thinking through. Yeah, it kind of like broke off into two different segments is the way I think about it. It's like helping carriers understand what's in their forms,
Mm-hmm.
right? Which is one set of problems and issues to solve. And the other one, which we tried to tackle and never really got to a full solution, was checking policies for brokers to make sure that the correct information was included in there, brokers and agencies. And so that was definitely something I would go back in time and fix, which is pick one or the other.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's kind of where it went. Both those problems were needed solving.
Yeah. I have a future question for you, and we still got to talk about Bold Penguin.
Yep.
But one of the things I keep hearing on the life insurance side, I think we all have, is life insurance is sold, not bought. And, you know, personal lines has a lot of success going direct and online and all that. As soon as you move into commercial, there's more agent and broker activity. And as the accounts get bigger and the lines get more complex, it's even less likelihood to be in direct. But there are things changing today, new players like Bold Penguin that are starting to blur some of those lines or make it easier to transact digitally, even if you still have a partner or a distributor. But there's still that advice and understanding piece. Do you think the seeds that you planted, is that the kind of thing that we need to drive the switch in sold, not bought, like on the life insurance side or in some of these other products where not just a trained insurance professional can make use of the output, but it could sort of democratize it down to the individual consumer?
Yeah. So just to kind of reframe your question, are you kind of saying like, is the agent going to go away in the process of buying insurance for commercial businesses potentially?
So I've been hearing that since I joined the industry,
Yeah.
20 something years ago.
Yeah.
Whether that happens or not, more about like, does the end consumer get to understand better? And are there cases where, like I'm still going to have my financial advisor, whether he's selling me life insurance or I'm like, hey, this is my need. Can you make this happen?
Yep.
But I don't even understand, like, how does that product match my situation?
Yeah.
And is that the thing to engage in the conversation? I think it
Yeah,
can
totally
help his sales, not replace him.
The answer is definitely yes. Like you will be able, as a business, you'll be able to get answers to your questions about insurance more and more going forward, right? A lot of those answers are kind of buried in the insurance policy language or your limits table. Like some of the most confusing parts of insurance, frankly, like an insurance policy, are the tables. The tables are insane. This is like one of my biggest pet peeves is how ridiculous tables can be in insurance policies. So understanding that, yeah, it'll be easier. Like, machine learning and technology will get better and better at understanding this stuff without a doubt. So that eventually people should be able to type in a question like, am I covered for government shutdown of my business? Right. And get an answer or kind of get led to an answer where they can then call their agent and talk to them. Of course, without a doubt that we're moving to that place. It's just, we're not there yet.
Yeah. No, I think all these things are it's like autonomous cars. Like, at some point, no one will own cars and we'll all be in these shared pods, but like, that could be 80 years, 20 years, 120 years. Who knows?
Yeah. And I don't think we're that far off, right? I mean, it ends up coming down to how long does it take to structure the data and then label the data and then understand the data in the way that a human does. It's really like no different than driving. Driving just need like autonomous driving, as I understand it, they just needed a lot of images that they could understand over time to figure out how to drive. Now, I may have way oversimplified that. That's not my area, but like insurance policies, for a machine to understand insurance policies, it just needs structured data from a policy, a lot of it. And that takes a lot of time. And you have to explain to the machine what it is. And then over time, it figures it out.
Okay. Talk to me about the Bold Penguin deal. So why, how, what comes of that? Like, give me the story.
Yeah. So the why. I'll start with the why. I still remember, like, I was talking to Ilya. Ilya Bodner is the co-founder, CEO of Bold Penguin. And I just remember, like, we got connected. We had talked in the past at conferences and stuff, so definitely knew who he was. Frankly, did not understand what Bold Penguin was. And so he explained it to me, and I was like parked in a school parking lot. I pulled over to talk to him. And I literally, and this is like not, this is a raw, what happened. Like, I just paused while he's talking, and I was like, holy crap, he has such a bigger vision of what to solve in business insurance than I do. Like, policy language is a small thing. Trying to solve small business insurance across the board, that is much bigger. And I was like, this is a huge platform for us at RiskGenius potentially, if we can connect our technology to what he's doing. And so that was kind of the why. Like, I was just like, this is really cool. Like, I can get behind this. Like, that's a big thing, right? For, one founder to join another company. And it was like, okay, is this something that would be fun to do?
Yeah.
So that was the why. The how was painstaking hours over 2020. Doing all the things you do, talking, understanding the business. My last trip actually was out to Columbus, Ohio, and then to New York, and then to Hartford. And I got very sick on that trip. Like, this is the end of February. So, you connect the dots, what happened.
Wow.
And then from there, doing a acquisition through the pandemic. So all through Zoom. Let's see. A lot of the big things tended to happen when I was on family vacations. So I'll always remember that, like in South Carolina. Yeah. I got a term sheet, I think, when I was in South Carolina or something like that. So, and then, closing the deal in October. So it was just a journey of getting comfortable, basically.
Over many months.
Yeah.
That initial call in the school parking lot, was that a like, oh, this is a brilliant partnership idea or something we should be connected on? Or was that maybe we should be a part of this?
It was more about maybe we should be a part of this. There was like the technology / business problem that we were going to solve. I was like, that's really interesting. And frankly, there was the financial aspect too, where I was like, holy cow, let's attach to that rocket ship. That thing is crazy. Like, that's kind of the other side of it.
Well, and on that note, from October to what, like late February?
Yeah.
So like 5 months, not even. Then Bold Penguin gets acquired by American Family.
Yep.
So what is that like? Because you join on, and then the company's a part of something else.
Yeah, I mean, I'm a leprechaun, right? Everything I touch right now is turned into gold, is what I'm jokingly telling people.
Do you want to join me? I'm excited for this podcast now.
Yeah, your podcast is going to be the #1 podcast now across all genres.
That's why
so congratulations.
Just fitting with the leprechaun.
Yeah, Gimlet Media is going to come and buy you right now.
Nice.
Let's see. Yeah, no, I on the AmFam deal, like, I wasn't part. It was really nice actually to not be a part of all the negotiations for the first time in 9 years, right? Yeah. Just for, I'd heard inklings because things just kind of peter through the industry. So I knew something was up, didn't really know what, and so press release dropped. I had an idea the day before, basically, of what was going on. I love it because I honestly, I think it's a great deal for everyone because, like, AmFam is not, they don't sell a lot of commercial insurance, as everyone's probably gathered. They just want to be involved in it and start to grow it. So they allow us to remain what we are, which is like these kind of neutral connection between carriers and brokers. Like, we want everyone to win, but we're not going to like put our fingers on the scales of any one side to help them like win over the other side. And so we can keep doing that. I literally have seen the AmFam people once in a all company webinar. I think that's it. And then I'm supposed to get a care package from them with like goodies and stuff.
Okay.
Like, we're just doing the same thing we were doing, just trying to grow it much faster. I'm thinking about bigger ideas now, like now that, we have kind of that behind us, what's something even bigger we can do.
Yeah.
So we'll see where we go with that. But yeah, it's a lot of fun. I'm doing a lot of marketing at Bold Penguin now,
Sure.
which is so much fun. So
Yeah. Well, that's what I was going to ask, and I figure it's still sorting itself out. But like, what do you do? What do you come on board to work on when you
yep.
had your own business and your own idea and plan? Is it
Yep.
the same thing accelerated? Is it like what is it that you're digging into?
Yeah. So this is a really interesting one. I think one of the things that happened in this deal that, and so one of the things that I evaluated is like, is this going to be good for the RiskGenius team? Right. When
Yeah.
we came over, like that was important. Like I did not want everyone to get fired right away. And so no one has gotten fired, right? Like everyone came over in the initial transaction. And I think one of the things, and this is just, being pretty transparent, is like I grinded on RiskGenius for like 9 years,
Yeah.
right? RiskGenius now has, we talked right before we started about Sherry Trites for Sluice, right?
Yeah.
I courted her for many years, frankly, to come over to RiskGenius. And then like it happened. And then the AmFam, the Bold
Yeah.
Penguin things all happened. But what's awesome is like, she's like running product now on the RiskGenius side, right? She is that entity. And
Yeah.
like, frankly, for me, it's been really nice not to have to think about like the direction of the product every
Yeah.
day, every waking minute. I've
Yeah.
been wanting to test out my marketing and sales ideas. And so I'm doing that now. Frankly, for Bold Penguin, I think one critique I had for Bold Penguin, and I don't think anyone would be surprised, was like coming in, I was like, I don't know what you do. And if I go to your website, I still don't know what you do.
Yeah.
And so I'm cleaning that up now with the marketing team. It's like kind of a passion point for me now. We are like, it should be like a ubiquitous that Bold Penguin is like, we do quote and bind for insurance agents. Like if you're not on it doing small business quote and bind, you're really missing out. And so I'm trying to get that message out there now,
Yeah.
and then letting Sherry run with the RiskGenius product.
So it gives you some space to kind of think broader, more strategically about direction and maybe positioning.
Yeah, I love, like, positioning is one of my favorite things in the entire world, like
Yeah.
to think about. What's it called? Positioning, the Battle for the Mind, or whatever that book's called, right? It's one of my favorite books out there. I actually reread that book right before I started again at Bold Penguin. It's a really short
Timing.
book.
Yeah.
Just to think about, what could I do? So like helping redo the website was one of the first projects I took on. Kind of version 2 will be coming out maybe later this year. Um, yeah, and then like really digging into how the business model works of
Yeah.
Bold Penguin for agents, I think is really super important. And so I'm working on that now.
I think that's something for any founders listening. In my mentoring work, that is a lot of what comes up is like, I don't know what you do, and I've spent hours with you.
Yep.
And when I tell you that, your response to me doesn't actually clarify anything.
Yep. Oh
So, like,
gosh, man.
finding
That
that,
was maybe the one thing we were good at Risk Genius above everything else, is just telling
yeah,
people what we did. Like, we help you analyze your policy. That's it. Right.
super straightforward.
Yeah. And, then people would say, why? Like, you
Yeah,
never want to answer all the questions in your first statement.
right.
You want to give enough where they're like, why, how, what are you talking about?
Right.
You
Get
know
them
what I mean?
curious about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, maybe it goes back to your point about like, I wish we had focused in a bit more.
Yep.
Like, the problem for a lot is they take the M in MVP, not to
Yep.
mean minimum, but like maximum. We're going to do all these things because we
Yeah.
can and we're brilliant and we're great.
Yep.
Or, this is who we are, but we make money on this thing over here. So we also do that. It's like, well, now the story's muddy.
Yep.
And I don't know, if you're an investor, I don't know what you're investing in.
Yep.
Chris, what do you think's coming for the industry? Like, obviously 2020 pushed digitization. It was I was talking to Kevin Carriage at Hiscox the other day, and he said it was like a tailwind. It got people moving towards digitization and thinking about how they get their coverage differently than many people were doing before.
Yep.
What's the next push in small business? What do you think is a dynamic that's at play, or maybe is under the surface right now that you think we're going to be facing?
Yeah, that's a great question. So first of all, like quoting and binding online for small business insurance is almost now a requirement.
Yeah.
If you're doing it via email or something else, you're doing it very inefficiently. Now, most people are still doing it that way, but like I think you're going to see very quickly the business model change for small business insurance.
Yeah.
Number two, the thing that I'm super excited about is how's data going to augment the process and make it even better, right? So like one of the first things I wrote up when I came over to Bold Penguin was like, what was the why of Bold Penguin acquiring RiskGenius? And the path I went down is I was like, well, what did fintech do many years ago before they became big? So like Ant Group, right? Ant Group's a Chinese fintech. Um, and I'll always remember they acquired a Kansas City company to do like vision technology to look at somebody's face and know who that was so you could sign in right away,
Yeah.
right? Now we're all used to that on our iPhone, but they did this many years ago. And they did it because they wanted, third world countries and Chinese users of their technology to be able to open their phone up and log in with their face. And so I started thinking about, well, what's the equivalent of that in small business insurance? The equivalent of that, in my opinion, is we're going to be delivering this soon at Bold Penguin. You type a company's name in, and the whole application fills itself out.
Yeah.
It's like magic.
Yeah.
Right. And so I cannot wait for that. I know it's coming. The insurance intelligence group at Bold Penguin are working on it. And that's going to be super awesome. Yeah, I think the third thing, I think people are just going to get, so we talked about you have to have quote and bind online. That's obvious, right?
Yep.
Then you're going to have this data start augmenting the process. So if you think about it as pipes, the pipes are fixed for small business insurance. Then we're going to start figuring out what's in these pipes and how can we make it better to get small business insurance, working and flowing better. Then the third part is people are going to get really, really smart about small business insurance and almost like optimizing what customers are going after. We do this through a rules engine at Bold Penguin, but people are going to also be thinking about this like in their own businesses too. Like, what business do we know how to help in ridiculous ways? Like maybe it's like aquatic divers, right? Anybody who sells aquatic diving equipment, we can tell them every single risk that they're going to have for the next 10 years because we've done thousands of these businesses before. And so we want to get every aquatic business out there, their insurance, and we want to bid for that insurance and get that insurance and bind that insurance because we know the best carrier to go to. And then we'll help them and keep them as a customer for the next 10 years. Like that kind of optimization is coming. And I think it's going to be really, really interesting and really helpful, frankly, for businesses, small businesses.
Is that about understanding the risk is about product manufacturing? Because a piece of it is like the products out there may not genuinely fit what their actual needs are, or what we're seeing is so many of the dynamics of what drives their needs, like being a gig economy worker versus being full-time in your job.
Yep.
Your need is different, and that's where I see something like Thimble comes up as trying to solve for that on-off switch or shorter duration because your need isn't 24/7 365.
Yeah, it's all of that, right? It's like maybe the language in the policy needs to change, right? Based on who you are. Maybe the limits need to be higher or lower based on the business that you run. And yeah, maybe it needs to be turned on and off depending on who you are. Maybe it needs to be something that is literally every day they recalculate your limits based on what you did the night before, right? I heard that use case recently in one industry, and I was like, that makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
So it's the one holdback right now is frankly the carrier APIs. They're bad. Now, some of the carriers, then you can probably think of who these are. They're great, but like most carrier APIs are just not there to get all this done. And so we got to speed that stuff up. I actually have a call later with someone at a carrier, and it's like, yeah, fix your APIs. That is where I would go all in right now. Fix your APIs.
Is that a core system issue, or is this solvable even if their core system is a bit outdated?
I'll be totally honest with you. I don't know the answer to that question,
Yeah.
but like either way, I don't care. Fix it,
Yeah.
right? Whatever it takes, because like this is all going to be API driven. It's going to be all, and I remember lots of people talking about APIs back in the day, and I didn't care because like, frankly, RiskGenius wasn't solving a problem that really mattered a lot with APIs.
Yeah.
But now that I understand how all these systems are working and like how the risks and businesses are going to be passed back and forth, like it is all API driven, and it will be.
I'm glad you said that. I did a talk yesterday for an investment bank's clients, and so one of the Q&A questions was like, so what's the technology that you think is most important? And I don't care for questions like that in general, because I think people are expecting something with like a hashtag before it. Like in 2015, it would have been blockchain, and now they're over that. But actually, I think it's as simple as APIs. And I know that's not sexy enough to get them excited, but like actually, that I think, and getting it right, as you're saying, like that's the unlock, because now everything talks and everything can, and you can have like the exact right solution at the exact right moment in the customer journey, or for that bit of coverage, or maybe coverage is a connection of 6 different carrier offerings to create one solution for your aquatic diving equipment sellers, or whatever the business is. So I totally agree with you, even if it doesn't have the, like you didn't say ML, AI, like, and whatever other buzzwords, which are all great and matter, but it's more fundamental than that.
And it's like, it all comes back to the pipes, right? Like the pipes are getting fixed. You better make sure you can connect to those pipes. It'd be like building a house and then realizing at the end, we did not build anything to connect to the water pipes. Right. It'd be crazy talk. Like, or like bringing in something from France that doesn't actually connect to the pipes the correct way. You better make sure your parts work, because all those pipes they're built and people are connecting up very quickly.
Yeah. That's really well said. Chris, I could keep you on forever, but I'm going to let you go. That was really, really insightful. Thanks for, telling that kind of Genesis story, some of the ins and out. I feel like that was like a condensed version of some of the cases I've gotten into in my book, but like, that's awesome.
Cool.
Really, really cool journey that you've been on, and I hope it's fun.
Yeah. Oh, if it wasn't, I would be in bed still or something.
That's fair enough. Yes, you got up to do this. That says something. Thank you so much, and best of luck with all the marketing, but bigger picture, like positioning something that could enable a real shift in the largest part of the commercial market. Chris, thank you so much for the time.
Yep, thank you.
Oh, what awesome stories. Really cool journey that Chris had. Great to get him on and just hear some of the real life experience through that process, but the thoughts on, why and what was going on, what was he trying to solve for. I think that's so interesting, right? We have to have a purpose for what we're doing, and typically the successful startups, successful companies are the ones who speak to that purpose and get clear on it. So to hear from the person who's living in the midst of that thought process and that journey, I think is so insightful. Definitely things you can take into your business, whether you're a startup or you've been around for decades or centuries or more. So great to have Chris on. So huge thank you again to Chris and to the whole team at Bold Penguin for making that happen. And a thank you to Medallia for making this episode possible through their sponsorships. Big thanks to Medallia and the whole team there. Also, if you haven't picked up the Future of Insurance book series, you can pick that up at Amazon or at futureofinsurance.com. And of course, you should be subscribed to this show, whether it's in a podcasting platform like Apple Podcast or Spotify or Stitcher or Google Podcasts or whatever. Or if you're watching this on YouTube, definitely subscribe, hit the notification button so that you get all the updates and you don't miss an episode. And with that, I hope to see you next time, or you hear me next time with my next guest. But I'm looking forward to helping you find some inspiration to keep pushing this industry ahead. Thanks, everyone.